Welcome back. And we are moving into our first conversation this morning as we are joined by Senator Osmany Salas, who is the representative for the Belize Network of NGOs. And we also have with us via Skype Aldair Gongora, who is the survey administrator. Aldair is joining us from Boston University, where he's pursuing his doctorate degree. And we are going to talk about the online survey on the referendum on going to the ICJ. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning. Good morning.
Now, we got to start off just by talking about the NGO network itself and what has been the conversation taking place there on whether or not to put forward a position on going to the ICJ.
Yes, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
Right, for us to share. And to share with the public the role that we see for ourselves. I will say from the get-go that as a network, we have decided, at least for now, we've decided that we will not take a position on whether or not we should go to the ICJ in relation of taking the dispute, or the Guatemala claim to the ICJ. We have decided to contribute to the public awareness campaign. And that is very important because there are some very vocal, vociferous, Belizeans on the no side and on the yes side, and we'll get into the survey.
Yeah.
But from some initial results of the survey, I can see that people are crying out for objective information, from trustworthy information, and this is the role we can play. So just in case I forget, and maybe towards the end I can come back to this, but as a network and in partnership with my social partners, senator colleagues, and the University of Belize, we are planning up to 10 lecture series countrywide between November and February. So every single municipality, the larger ones, and I'm hoping we can include Independence Village as well, because that includes a couple of other large communities. So we are planning that, and to me it is important that the public know that we, in these presentations, we won't be tabling any particular position. We, as the leadership of the university told us, for them to be involved, the presentations need to be unbiased, objective, and factual. And that is how we will program the activities. And later on I can share a little bit as to how we have the event structured.
Yeah.
We're still trying to secure some feature speakers. They haven't committed, they've expressed interest. So when they've committed, I would like if you invite us back on the show to talk more in detail about what, where, when. No?
Yeah.
So we think it is important. If we would put a position at this time on yes or no, I think we will marginalize or turn away a big segment of the population.
Yeah.
I am convinced that the undecideds right now are a big chunk of Belizean voters. And I believe that is a big number because these are people who they're undecided because they want to know more.
Yeah.
They want to find out more. They're not ready to make a position yet. They might be very irritated with the noise out there. There's a lot of noise. And I am encouraged that we have such a large percentage right now of undecideds. They are the ones who will decide, They are the ones who I think will tilt the vote one way or the other. Yeah. And that is why I think and that in putting the information forward, we need to be very responsible. Responsible in how we put forward information, what we put forward. Responsible enough to be careful how we say certain things so that we don't rile up a huge number of Belizeans, and that could have negative consequences.
Can I ask though, in the consultation within the network itself, was it a unanimous decision to not put forward a position?
I would say yes, yes.
Okay.
As a network, we decided that we won't.
Okay.
At this time. I cannot tell you if before referendum date we'll have a position. We still have to discuss that, but for now we don't have a position.
So the alternative to a position...
We do have a position, sorry. The position is that our role is to contribute to the public awareness campaign, to help in coordinating, to help in getting people out, to help in organizing events, and hence our partnership with the other social partner colleagues, senators, and the university.
Yeah. So the alternative to taking a position is establishing the online survey.
The online survey came about because since we're involved now at the public awareness campaign level, we thought it would be very interesting to try and gauge the perspectives of Belizeans on the territorial claim at this time. What do Belizeans think about the claim? Where are they getting their information from? What are the, what's the demographic makeup of the people participating in the survey, and by age, by gender, by where they live, by where they work, where are they getting their information from? So we have decided to do this in 1 month intervals. So about 2 weeks from now, we'll have completed the first month, and at that time, we will be ready to share more detailed information on all these parameters, and it should shed some light on maybe where more attention needs to be given in relation to sharing information in various ways. So we are targeting the online community at this time. Granted, that's not necessarily a representative sample of the Belizean voting public, but it should be indicative. It should give an indication of what the feeling or the perspectives are right now.
Now, in terms of, I want to go back a bit, in terms of the space that you occupy as the Senator for the NGO community and doing this survey, because in the past, the most credible surveys used to come from an organization, I don't know if you're aware, called SPARE.
I used to be on the board at one time.
Correct. And so
I miss SPARE.
We all were at one point,
including myself.
Yes.
And my question is, what do you think is the value of this survey, online survey, being put out there by the NGO community who are seen as impartial?
I think it
in a climate where we have, as you say, a lot of noise.
Right. Somebody needed to do it. It needed to be done, and it wasn't being done, and we saw the need for it, the space for it, and so as a network, we decided to go for it. I mean, I must say that in discussions with another of my colleagues in the Senate, he also referred to the need for something like this, and we realized, hey, somebody needs to do it.
That's not Senator Larago.
Yes. very good.
Very good.
But it worked out almost organically, where this young Belizean, PhD student at Boston University had a similar idea, and so we decided, why not team up? And we use your skills, and we use our network to get the link out and encourage as many Belizeans that are part of the online community to participate. So I'm telling you, we are sending the link to the large companies, to the schools, to the unions, and we're asking them, send it to your membership, send it to your teachers, students, and faculty. So we spread it as much as we can.
So you've given us the opportunity to bring Aldair into the conversation.
Yes.
And Aldair, thank you for joining us this morning. Good. All right, so I want to find out where your interest started in being able to put together this survey on this issue.
So I'm very thrilled to be on. And a lot of my interest in surveying in particular just my general interest in data. Love numerics, that has to be a quantitative aspect of it. And I'm also very passionate about the issues going on at home. Although I'm not, I try my best to always deal with any social issues that are going on and contribute to that discussion. And I just thought this is a opportunity to use metrics for some social issues. And I honestly started off by just going with it. And I'm just happy that it
So, from what we were able to gather, you're saying that this started from your own personal interest, and partnering with the NGO network gives credibility to the survey. But one of the very primary questions I have: polls are scientific by nature, and there are many people who easily dismiss polls if the proper structure is not put in place in how you collect the results. Not just whether it's an online platform, but even in the formulation of the questions. Talk to me about the extensive, either one of you, what went into putting together, what questions would be included, how they would be worded, and so forth. Aldair?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So primarily, it started off by myself doing research on the issue itself and trying to figure out what exactly is happening. What is the ICG? What is the claim? What do we know and what do we not know? And very quickly, I realized that I strayed away from questions dealing with should we go or should we not go, questions about why, and more lead towards scientific inquiry of saying why are people thinking, why are these arguments? And then I realized there was a lack of metrics on demographics. There was a lack of metrics on how people are getting their information. What are people? What is the distribution of age, gender? What are the thoughts? What are the abilities? What are the thought paradigms that are prevalent in the country? And I took a step back from all that. Okay, so if I want to analyze and it's not present, I need to hopefully true. And as you mentioned, putting thought into what the questions are, how the survey is structured, if it's online or not online. The reason why we went online is because it was the easiest and fastest way for survey to be deployed. And also the cheapest. Just a link on Google Forms, it's free to set up. And now to answer your question, dealing more with the questions in the survey, look at the survey itself. It starts off by asking very what is your nationality, where do you live, where do you work, age, gender, and really the meat of the entire survey comes at where are you getting your information from, what is your perspective on the ICG, and do you have any supporting claims? And also something I was very interested in is where are people getting their information from? Yeah. So people can answer that question, and also people can assess themselves on the confidence that they have in their knowledge. Yeah. However, that question was done with the intent of trying to extract the self-assessment of people and not really defining what that knowledge is. So it's a very subjective question, and it was purposefully done so.
Yeah. Yeah, I did find that question very interesting in the confidence level for the dispute, in understanding the territorial claim itself. Now, the first, I think, opinion people may have on this issue, on this survey is the online demographic in no way can represent what the wider Belizean public thinks and feels and wants to do come April 2019. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly valid claim. And I think that it goes back again to your question about polls and your intent. And we're not trying to do predictive analysis. We're not trying to say how many people will go out and what will they vote. I think this is more from the perspective of attaining some form of understanding and achieving some form of data set. And it being online is still a subset of that greater population. And I feel that although it is still a subset, I think that with the appropriate statistical techniques, you can gain understanding of at least trends that might be prevalent in the country. And although you might not be able to do an analysis of the magnitude of your impact, you can at least look at trends that are present and that lie in the data.
Mm-hmm. The problem is that a survey itself, and it has its utility, but it's a first step to other things. Either it's directed towards a policymaker or towards some entity to have a second step, which is responsiveness. And one of the issues is the sample size and the sample, what the sample is. And if it's the entire online community, it might not even be something which can be accurately relied upon by the policymakers or those who want a responsive second step to it.
No, as I mentioned earlier, to me, the important objective of the survey, or what I hope can come out of it, is to give us an indication of where people are getting their information from, and of the ones that have said, I feel I am highly knowledgeable about this matter, or really, where are you getting your information from the ones who have responded at? If it is only from social media, for example, and you feel I am highly knowledgeable enough to make a decision, really, you know? So it gives us some insight, some guidance on the type of targeted campaign, education campaign that probably needs to occur. Because as I mentioned earlier, you know, one thing I have noticed from the preliminary results is that, right, there's a big percentage of undecideds. There's a big percentage of it, and I think what the survey tells us, and I hope Aldair gets the opportunity to share some insights on the different opinions that people have put forward. Hundreds of opinions. They're over 1,000 now. We need to be, everybody who's involved in the education campaign needs to be responsible in how the information is delivered. We need to be strategic in how we select the individuals that will speak, in a national, international forum also, because as you pointed out in your town hall meeting, we had a national audience, an international audience. So we have to be responsible in how we put things forward. So one of the most important results I think that will come out of this will be guidance on how we should approach the next steps in the public awareness campaign and how targeted they should be.
In the diaspora, and my final question in terms of that aspect of it, in terms of what we use it for, there are probably more people in the diaspora than will vote in the referendum. And an online survey allows for a mechanism that the diaspora might even outvote or might out-participate the
and we
locals.
need to be honest here.
So are there any mechanisms to be able to, any algorithms to be able to separate how many persons in the diaspora are, or how many, the margin of error, and how many people locally?
Would you want to respond to that, Aldair?
That's an excellent question. So to expand a bit on the first question that you had asked about the sample size, honestly, we realize that it is online, and the hope that could come out from this would be that it serves as a motivating factor to get other organizations involved in collecting data and to amass some form of data set that is representative of more than the online community. This is not only the first step towards some form of quantitative understanding, but perhaps could also serve as a motivating case study that data is important, and we can say things about policy using data. And to answer your second question, with regards to the diaspora, about 87% of the people who responded to the survey were Belizean without any with no other nationality, and majority of the people who responded are people who reside in Belize. So although we are getting feedback from the diaspora, which is important, we see that majority of the data coming in are from people living in Belize.
Awesome. And we also have, because, and we'll get into some of the results because I think it is important, two things. What I hear from you is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, the intent of the survey is to ascertain primarily how confident people feel in their knowledge of this issue, and a collection of any opinion they may have on this issue, whether it's the education campaign, the ICJ, the referendum, or the overall dispute. Now, there's also qualitative data and quantitative data that can be added in as well. And one I find interesting is looking at those who have self-reported, because it's a self-reporting mechanism, that they are registered voters. So even if it is diaspora, 90% are saying they're registered to vote. Right? What does that represent to you? Does it lead you to believe that you're hitting the right target for this poll?
So to go to the former part of your statement, so I don't think the purpose is to ascertain anything. I think the purpose of the survey is twofold. One is to collect data, and the other is to paint some form of illustration. Okay. I feel that making assertions are but a product of what we can do with the survey. Just answering that portion of your question. The second part, where people are reporting that 90% of the people who responded to the survey are registered voters, I would take that I wouldn't take it as objectively that is what it is. I think that's just what we see from the survey. And again, I wouldn't focus much on the magnitude of the percentages, rather than I would essentially say that your focus should be on that majority of the people are registered voters. As to what the numbers actually are, because of the sample size, there are inherent limitations to the survey.
Okay.
I think it might be a good time to
get into some of the results.
Yes.
So it is an ongoing survey, but what you've done to provide some information to us this morning is that you cut off 2 days ago the survey and started to analyze
to
that.
do this
It's
preliminary
still ongoing.
It's still live.
Yeah.
It's still live.
So you started to analyze at 1,500 respondents.
Yes, and as of this morning, it was already at about 1,800.
Okay.
So it's growing by the half hour.
So this is important. So when people see this, this is already outdated information, but it was what the poll was two days ago.
2 days ago.
And a poll is essentially a pulse. A pulse right now will be different from it a bit later. So let's start off here. This is what we're looking at. Aldair, are you going to walk us through the results?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So essentially the time period that we're looking at here is from September 20th to September 25th. And if we look at the overview of the survey, we see that the purpose is, like I mentioned earlier, twofold. One is to collect data, and the other is to paint some illustration. And of course, as I pointed out on the slide, it's within the limitations of the data that we receive. And some of the details on just the general survey are there are 12 questions, 11 are required, 1 is optional. We're hoping to do time-dependent reporting. Also, very important, all of this data will be made publicly available. It will be open access, so people can download both the data set itself, and they can also download all the code that will be written to process the data. The code will be written in an open source language, so that anyone with any computer can download and process the data. And of course, as has been a main topic in the discussion, is that there are limitations to the survey, so we can't make any definitive statements on any particular claims that we might have.
Okay. All right.
So now, the nationwide glance, and I think this will be very helpful to some of the questions you initially had. So under the nationwide glance, what we can see is that about 86.9% of people who responded are Belizeans that hold no other nationality. Majority of males are people have responded to the survey, and we can see that in terms of age, ages between 18 to 35 make up about 50% of the respondents to the survey, which because of the online nature makes sense. And also we can see that about 90% are registered voters.
Okay.
Next slide.
Next slide, yeah.
And very importantly, to also point out, as you can see at the bottom left-hand corner of every slide, we have processed data between the time period of September 20th to September 25th, but we're also only looking at 1,500 responses.
Okay.
So moving on to the regional glance, what we can see is that the 3 main areas that have contributed to the survey are from Cayo, Belize, where the Belize district is not including the islands. And also we see responses coming in from Orange Walk. And then the rest of the responses, which is um, about the rest of the 40% coming in from the other areas.
Okay.
And if you have any questions at this
If we
time,
can
You-
jump to the seventh
you-
slide,
you-
Aldair, I think.
Before we go forward, Aldair, you were saying that the age sample is reflective of the nature of the survey, but there are two aspects of the preliminary results that kind of bother me. The first,
Sure.
the first is that the representation of males to females, that doesn't seem true to form, because even you look at the re-registration of voters, males are far less than females. The second one is in terms of where people are responding. Kaya district is the forerunner, when you would think that districts like Toledo and Stan Creek, who have a vested interest and have been very vocal and emotional about this issue, well, not emotional, but it's something true to them. It's a real issue for them, that they have been not participating as much. What accounts for that? Is it just the way that the survey is being promoted and the marketing of the survey? What does account for that?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And first of all, I'm very happy that you're asking these types of questions, because these are the types of discussions that we need to have. And these are the discrepancies in data sets that need to be brought, and we need to ask the question of why. So this is just me deducing what a possible reason would be from the data presented. And one might just be access to the internet, and having access, moreover than just having access to the internet at work, having readily available connection and being able to go online and actually fill it out. As we can see, that majority of the responses came from Cayo, Belize, and Orange Walk. So it would make sense that perhaps there's higher internet activity in these districts, which results in higher participation from these three areas.
But it's also very subjective, isn't it? I mean, can people say that perhaps there's less interest in certain areas as well, as much as you can say that it's less internet connectivity?
I think it's plausible.
Yeah.
It's plausible.
Yeah. All right.
Well, we can say
let's,
for sure.
and I think this will be the challenge that you will perhaps continuously face in putting forward these results. There are many unknown variables.
We need to decide if we would want to engage in a more robust survey later on.
Yeah,
You know, something that is more
more
scientific. But
scientific
that's a
sample.
discussion we'll need to have.
Okay.
I think it would be very useful if we can jump to the seventh slide, where we actually go into some of the
What people
results
are
of the
saying.
knowledge
Yeah, let's do
confidence
that.
and where they get the information. Could we do that? That's slide number 7.
You're asking Aldair to
So
walk
what
us
we're
through?
looking at
Yeah.
now
Yes,
is
but
the
the slide should be on the
actual-
screen as well.
This is the nationwide glance, and the very first chart that we're seeing is
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, that is the measure as to how much people feel confident in their knowledge. Let me go back to the actual question. The question says, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 not confident, 5 very confident, how confident do you feel with your knowledge on the Belize-Guatemala territorial dispute?
Yeah, so I think this is a very rich slide that we're looking at. And one, we can see that just looking at the data itself, if we're looking at the knowledge confidence data, you see that you can essentially get two clusters. One being people who say that they're not really confident on their knowledge, and then another cluster being people who are confident in their knowledge. And we can see that majority of people lie on saying that they are very confident on their knowledge on the issue. However, that should ring I should ring an alarm. It should be very alarming in the sense of that never defined what knowledge essentially is. So whether that be knowledge based on facts, knowledge based on hearsay, knowledge based on what you've heard from your friends and family, that's your self-assessment.
Yeah.
And I think it's indicative, at least illustrating that depending where you might be getting your information from, you might assess yourself differently. And although we had 5 different levels, the data itself breaks down into people who are pretty much not confident and people who feel pretty confident, where majority lie on the latter cluster of being very confident in their own knowledge, what they think they know about the issue.
What is
And so that leads us to the next point in where people get their information from.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Exactly. So we then took also data on sources of information, and we can see that the two winners are news and social media. Um, News would make sense with all the live stream going on. A lot of people have access to what is said on the news and even articles being online now. And even social media, a lot of people are very active on social media, and especially the people who are responding to the survey are probably very active on social media as well. So we see this as the two proponents or two main proponents of where people are getting sources of information from.
What is interesting is the correlation between those persons who, and if you go back to the next slide, the slide before, the correlation between the confidence of persons in terms of the way they feel and where they get information from, and books is very high with the persons who feel confident as to their knowledge, and on the opposite end of the scale is the lowest when it comes to people who aren't confident.
Yeah.
And also the correlation between the fact that one of the things about the survey, Aldair, to me is where people are fed information, they seem to eat it up more than where they have to actually go and get it. Because things like books, government information, and school aren't doing very well in terms of contributing to the knowledge that people have.
And the one on books, right, actually said books and other reading material,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
all the pamphlets, all the
It could
brochures,
be
etc.
pamphlets.
Yeah.
No, but I think, and government information is a very key indicator to look at here as well, because there is an ongoing education campaign being spearheaded by the government. So it really shows the reach, either the reach or how people are digesting the information.
If you notice the ones that responded 3, those are the ones I consider middle of the road. That you know, depending on the information they get from here to referendum day, they could decide either way, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see where they're getting their information from, and the majority of them are getting it from the news, from the news, and social media close second.
Yeah.
So you see, I referred to the noise earlier, and this is what we're hoping as a network is that we can help people filter through that noise, put information out. There's a lot of information online, you know.
But you know,
people are just not going after it.
You know something? It's probably a confusing demographic, because social media does have news. You have certain news items online. So
We post everything online.
yeah. So
Yes.
is there a proper way to distinguish between? Because I think when people think about news, they think about the 6:30 news, watching Marlene at 6:30. But there's also the printed online publication. Is there a way to distinguish the two?
I don't think so. I don't think the
Well,
way
I
it was
mean-
settled.
Yeah.
Probably the way
But the
it is
social
set up.
media was
But
referring
social
to the
media
platforms.
means you get it on social media,
Yes, you
whether
get it on
from
social media.
News 5's website,
But
News
if it
5's
is social media news, we wouldn't be able to say with any certainty.
What are your thoughts on that, Aldair?
Yeah, so the way it is currently set up, there isn't that clear separation between these two categories. And that's probably something we could create more options for the second set of the survey that we release.
Okay.
And I think that's a very important aspect of the survey, is that it is very dynamic in nature. It's not static, so we don't have to keep it exactly constant. If we see that there are questions that perhaps need a little bit more work, and that's the feedback that we get, it's pretty easy to make those changes and to paint that description of what we're seeing as the months go on.
Very interesting. Yes. So the final data set that we have here is the what I had mentioned earlier, the people who intend to vote. And a majority do intend to vote. A majority of those who filled out the survey intend to vote.
And I think that's very important in for two reasons. One is that it's very satisfying to see that within the small sample space that we have, which is the Belizean online community, majority of people are saying, yes, I want to go vote. Secondly, I think, which is implied in this data, is that if majority of the people in the online community are saying that, yes, they want to participate in going to the polls, then it begs the question, well, how can we use that? How can we use people who are active on social on social media and have access to the online survey and want to go vote, how can we mobilize these people, get the rest of the country motivated, and people who might not have access to the survey and who are not represented in this data? Or how can we use the representation that we have to mobilize people, get others to the poll?
All right, so what I really want us to dive into some of the feedback that you've received. There is an open-ended question in the end of the survey that says, feel free to provide feedback on the survey or any opinions on the issue. What are people saying?
Yeah, so so what I did is essentially I created a word cloud that basically takes all the responses that we've gotten, breaks them down into individual words, and takes the entire data set and searches for the words that appear the most, and essentially generates a word cloud with words that have the highest frequency of appearance in responses being the largest font in the image. So we can see here, it makes sense that the general feedback on the survey, we see words such as Belizeans, words such as Belize, people, the need, survey, country being of highest frequency. But if you really look for the smaller keywords, we do see themes of hope. We see themes of at the bottom center of the word educate. And in general, we see that people are at least glad and hopeful about this initiative, and at least in the smaller subset, what is being done.
Yeah. All right. So we switch slides. It's the previous image we're talking about. Yeah. Okay. So it says good. It says claim. It says decision.
It says educate.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Information, that came up quite high.
Yeah. Yeah.
Know, knowledge.
Integrity. Very small there.
Inform.
So,
And so the final one that we'll look at is now at the participant feedback on the ICJ.
yeah.
So here we see
Next
a
one.
very different painting of what the data is telling us. We see, again, the word Belize. A lot of people, it makes sense, are talking about the country. But we also see Guatemala also being in a very large font. So people are getting involved in the discussion. People are supporting whatever their perspective on the ICJ referendum might be. And very importantly, we also see the word need popping up quite frequently. And there people are discussing the dispute. People are also discussing what the claim is. And this illustration is more of a thematic portrayal of the data and not necessarily indicative of what exactly people's position.
Yeah, that's very clear because I can formulate sentences of different intentions just out of the words that I'm seeing
If
here.
you notice the word lose is there, even though it's spelled two different ways, but
Yeah.
you lose, right?
But
Lose and, oh, you're right.
what is interesting for me is how small, and that in terms of repetition, words like prove and fight are.
Independence and recognize.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of people, those are things that people were. It's very interesting.
And go,
Interesting.
is that phrase, I need to be very clear about this, the one below the purple ICJ in the very center, is it one phrase, go ICJ, or there are two separate words that came up a lot from the feedback?
Yeah, I think those are two separate words.
separate words,
Sometimes the way the algorithm might break up the text depends on how people type.
Yeah, because the
And
color
since
code
it
is similar.
online, sometimes you do get differences in spacing
Okay.
and different types of like spellings, for example, like they pointed out. So yeah, those are two different things.
Okay, okay. So what we are seeing is only the preliminary results, as we said very clearly. For anyone just tuning in, it's you stopped at 1,500, did this analysis starting 2 days ago. Today it's already at 1,800, which means this has already changed.
Yes.
What are you going to do with this information?
Yes.
And how do you filter out all the questions and unknown variables to still make use of the feedback you've gotten from people?
Could we put the last slide as we're talking, as you're finalizing? That has the link, and I really want the link to be promoted. Aldair was about to say something?
Yeah, so just was going to respond to the question, but I can respond after you shed some light on the last slide.
Yeah. No, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So for now, this is just an illustration of what people are saying. But my hope on processing at least the feedback on the ICJ referendum and processing the feedback on the survey itself is being a bit more strategic in what we're searching for. So like you mentioned, the phrase "Go ICJ" is very indicative of what people are saying and represents a particular stance. So in the reports, it would make sense to maybe design the algorithm to be filtering in the sense of searching for phrases that are representative of a position or not. And I think that would be more indicative of if people do want to go to the ICG or not want to go to the ICG, what supporting points do they have for that?
What I find very interesting, and just because you mentioned it, I want to say it for a moment. There is no or yes in the feedback. None that are visible to my eye. No or yes on the feedback of the ICJ. And that to me is really interesting.
So Marlene, to respond.
I think that's just a product of how the survey is structured, because the question before that is asking for people to say yes or no, unsure, undecided, or other. And this question is more geared towards just support for that claim. So I think people are responding in terms of just their supporting points and not putting emphasis on the yes or no.
Okay.
Yeah. So at the end of this first month, Aldair will help us to put together a report, a complete report of the analysis of the first month worth of data, and which we will share, amongst our network, but we'll share with our other partners, we'll share with the government, we'll share with the referendum unit, we'll share with whoever, we'll put it on our social media platform, on our page, because it could help various people, with various interests, to target their own campaigns and to get a good sense of what people are clamoring for in terms of information.
I have two final questions. My first is in terms of, maybe I should just cut it down to one, which is, how do you deal with participation fatigue? Because one of the goals, which I think is brilliant, is to have ongoing, almost a real-time assessment of it. How do you deal with that?
That's a very good question. I'll say it before Aldair says it. But what we have decided to do is to have a 1 month break in between the other surveys. So we expect to have, I believe, Aldair, correct me if I'm wrong, 3 more before referendum day.
Okay.
I think the final one will be about 2 or 3 weeks before the actual referendum. So we'll have another one in mid-October, I believe. And after that, mid-December. But we have like 3 more lined up.
Senator, are there even preliminary discussions? Because what this online survey shows is wonderful. It gives us some insight, but we need a scientific poll with representation and access to people that we know are in country and a one-time vote-only mechanism. Are there even preliminary discussions as to being able to execute something along those lines? Not asking for yes or no, but what you're asking here. What are your concerns? How confident? What do you know?
All I can relate is to the discussions I have had with Aldair for some ideas on how that could be done. Okay. He has given us some preliminary advice on how it could be done, on how it could be more scientific and robust, maybe by using phone numbers or email addresses or even voters' ID. And there is a way to still make that anonymous, right? And then we'll have to decide if we can afford to do it, afford in different ways, right? I already get the sense that...
We as in whom?
The network.
Because as a country, we cannot afford not to do it.
Yes, but we as a network. So we hope that we are starting something that hopefully, if we cannot do it on our own, continuing from now, others could take it up. Excellent. We missed the SPARE. You know, a SPARE would have been the ideal organization to do this. So in the meantime, this is what we are offering, right? At this time.
Well, we thank you for coming in and sharing just what you have collected so far. We're sure we're going to have this conversation again as you produce more results on what people are saying and feeling and thinking about this issue. Aldair, thank you as well for joining us this morning. It was a very short conversation, but we know that we will have time over the next couple of months to be able to find out more as we get closer to the date Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by a number of representatives talking about an ongoing workshop on incidents of early marriage. So please